Oh, you ready? Hold on, hold on. How my head look? I'm good? I'm good? Let's go to work. Welcome, welcome, welcome. My name is Donald Russell, owner and CEO of DRP Performance and DRP Talks. If you're new to my channel, please like and subscribe to my YouTube. Today we'll be on this episode talking with Dr. Brandon Alexander at Action Physical Therapy. We get to learn about the life of a chiropractor, not only just the cracking and the adjustments, but we get a better understanding of the assessments and how do we improve the body as a whole. So we're gonna meet with Dr. Brandon Alexander and we're gonna go over a little bit of assessment and what's some things that I can help to improve my body, and also what can you guys look to if you're looking to come in to see a chiropractor. Dr. Brandon Alexander is the guy to come to. Let's go check him out. All right, DRP family, we're here with Dr. Brandon Alexander of Action Physical Therapy. Dr. Alexander, I appreciate you for taking the time to talk with us.
For sure.
Tell us about yourself. How did you get started? What made you get into the life of being a chiropractor, and then also getting into physical therapy just in general?
Okay. So again, like you said, I'm Dr. Alexander, chiropractic physician per se. All right. Basically, I was into sports. When I was younger, I played through middle school, high school, even played in college. I played baseball, and it got to a point where I was injured. Right, and so I got injured and I had what's called medial epicondylitis, or golfer's elbow. All right, with that injury, it makes it so that, and I actually still kind of have it now, it just makes it so it's very, very stiff for you to do an extension of the arm. I went to a chiropractor at that time who was a part of the team that I was playing for, like the team doctor per se. And he basically showed me the ropes, he got me better, so forth. So while I was in school, I was like, well, dang, like this is a really cool profession. Because at the time when I was younger, I was like, well, at least he's not like a real doctor.
Yeah.
and it's funny to say that now because I look at how much I've gone through and I'm like, okay, well, no, they really are real doctors.
Exactly.
It's just that, I was looking not to do surgery or anything like that. And so I got better from the injury and so forth, and I decided to go the medical route. And when I started going in the medical route, I said, hey, this will be my plan A minus type, backup plan per se. And so when I did make it in baseball, that's when I went ahead and said I'll go into chiropractic, and went ahead and went to National University of Health Sciences. And yeah, that's where, came from there.
Oh, perfect. So what do you say that inspires you about doing this career most?
Okay. The thing that helps me the most, or what inspires me the most about just being hands-on with patients, is that basically it's an art form.
Yes.
Okay. And the art form behind it is saying, okay, you come in with physical ailments, physical pains, things that are tangible, things that you can touch. I can come in and say, hey, my elbow hurts, or hey, my knee hurts, or I feel a little stiff with rotating with my back or turning or lifting. And then I can say, okay, well, let me show you this stretch, right? And obviously physical therapists can do that too, right? Or athletic trainers can do that and so forth. But then there's that other element to it where it says, okay, well, let me adjust you. Right, and that comes from just somebody having a little bit of restriction in their body, and it gets you to a point where you're saying, well, let me do this, and after this one little movement, you now come off the table, and you're feeling like, wow, I actually can move a little better, and it's visual, it's visually aesthetic, because you can get up and you can see someone say, wow, I feel better, and you can visually see them move more, more easily. And so it's like that's the part that kind of makes me feel good, because it's like you come in, they walk in, and you can see the pain in them, and then when they walk out, you can see the relief that they have, and that's the best feeling ever in comparison to going to, for example, an MD or someone else who may prescribe medication, which is nothing wrong with, but they're not necessarily seeing the person leave out their office feeling better.
Exactly.
It's the hope that once they go get prescribed their prescribed medication or whatever else, that they're like, you know, when next time you come back in, hopefully these things have resolved your issues.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so Dr. Alexander, before we get into one or a couple of the major issues that I'm having, what are the steps or the process of a new patient coming in? You know, what do you do? Is there assessment? What happens when they first step in?
It's actually very, very simple. For chiropractic, you really don't necessarily have to have, if we're speaking on, you know, like financial rights, so if we're looking at insurance, normally you don't necessarily have to have a script, okay, for that. There's something that if you just have pain, you come in, you let us know. My front desk, she'll go ahead and ask you what you're here for. She'll give you a packet, pre-planned out packet, and it kind of gives you some things you have to fill out. For example, normally it gives you a visual scale list, a number list, as in the severity of your pain and so forth. Kind of gives you a diagram of a body to show where your pain is, to kind of give us a head start before I even come into the office and ask you what's going on, right? Exactly. I kind of have an idea of what's going on. Now on the physical therapy side of it, normally there needs to be a script. So you would have gone to your primary care before or orthopedic specialist or something like that, and then they send the script over, and then the same concept.
Okay.
You know, you get here, now we have an idea from the other doctor as into what the problem is. You fill out the information and so forth. But it's a very simple thing, and we even make it easy for you where you could fill out the packet before coming in and so forth.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay, so one of the problems that I have is pain in the right glute. I don't know whether it's piriformis. I don't think it's sciatica because I've researched that it can run, you know, all the way down the leg too as well. But I'm just trying to figure out what are some of the things I can do to kind of help, you know, prevent some of the pain, more so numbness that I have, and it's usually after long car rides of me just sitting for a long period of time, and then with everything going on with COVID, you're more at home now, so you're more in a sitting position. So what are some of the things that you would look for, or what are some of the things you would do as far as an assessment to kind of figure out where we can pinpoint, you know, what's my problem?
Okay, so one, I would look at, you know, just physique overall, right? And say, okay, you appear very fit individual, very physical and active individual. So I would take that into account and say it's probably not due to certain things. I can start canceling out things, right? Two, I would then say with these positionings, when do you feel it the most? And you said during sitting, for example, and then what was the other?
Just kind of long car rides.
Long car rides, stuff like that, right? So that's going to be predominantly in a flex position, right? That's, you know, put that into play. Two, I would then ask you as well, what's your history? So the history of your body, which only you would know, right? I can't know that off the top of my head. So I would ask you, you know, have you had any prior, not necessarily exams, but any x-rays or MRIs that have told you that maybe you have any disc issues or any spine issues that we need to be aware of? Because like you said, the sciatic that you've already looked up before, that would be associated with something coming around from your low back, right? So I would then ask you those things. And if all those things are, for example, no, or there hasn't been anything said that I have any pain there or any disc issues, whether it be herniation or bulges, stuff like that, then I would start going into your normal functional mobility, right? Because before I even touch you, let's see how can you move, right?
Gotcha.
Can we reproduce that pain just through you standing here, whether it be bending forward? I would ask you to bend forward first, you know, leaning back to the side, so forth, seeing if we can reproduce the pain.
Gotcha.
And then from there, I will go ahead and sit you down and then start to play around and see where and what areas are affected when you are in this type of position, if I'm pushing here, if I'm touching there, so forth.
Gotcha.
Again, can we reproduce the pain with any of those?
No issue.
Okay, so That's perfect, right? So now we can't reproduce it just through natural functional movement, right? So now we need to pick and pry a little bit to see if we can reproduce that. So I would have you sit up on the table first. Sitting up on the table, we're gonna go through a couple muscle strengthening things, right? So to see how strong you're able to do. Now by doing that, I'm able to tell if there's some weakness in some of the areas within maybe a little bit of the hips and the glutes and so forth, right?
Gotcha.
So here we would just ask you to lift your leg up as much as you can, right? And so I'm testing the strength to see. So what I'm doing is I'm pushing down as you are pushing up. Clearly everybody's different, so obviously some people are going to be a little stronger than others, but I'm able to tell that based off of doing both legs and the numerous times that I've done it. You can say, hey, and we number it. We number it from a 1 to a 5, for example. So 5 being that you're fully strong, 1 being that there's a weakness, very much a weakness, and you can barely move your leg, right? So for you, obviously, that'd still be a 5. You can still move it. There's no pain that's being reproduced with that. So again, hand up under the leg now. No, I'm gonna bring this down, and I want you to push down. So stomping down like you're, just like that. Same concept here. Pushing down, right? Good. Then we come out in front. We have you kick out. Good. And then we'll have you pull back. Okay, good. Same thing on this side. Kick out, pull back. Good. Then we would move down to your feet. You're gonna push up. Good. Down. Good. Up and down. Good. Now with those, now we're looking at quads, we're looking at hamstrings, we're looking at your tib anterior, we're looking at calves, we're looking at all these muscles to see if there's any weakness, if there's any change in any pattern, right? Because the nerves that are coming from your back are associated with your legs. So if there's any problems or any weaknesses or any tweaks there in your back, it'll affect the legs. And normally what'll happen is you'll start finding some weaknesses in the legs in certain areas, whether it be a numbness or tingling, whether it be an actual weakness of like you can barely move it because of the fact that it's so much pain and so forth, right? So that's why we want to check those first. And as of right now, again, you don't have any symptoms with that, right?
No
you
pain,
don't feel
no
no pain, right? So next, what we would call these are what orthopedic tests. Okay, so orthopedic tests, we learn these in chiropractic school, and it kind of gives us a little bit more information as into whether or not there are, again, neurological issues and sometimes musculature as well, musculoskeletal, okay? So what we do is we have you lift your leg here and just hold it out front. Now, when you do this, right, what that does is that the nerves that come down into your leg is now being extended, right? When you're flexed, go back down, when you're flexed, it's not disturbed, right? So we're trying to reproduce that pain. So when you extend your leg, you're now extending the nerves that are coming down from your back down into your leg, and by extending that, this should cause irritation if it's affected in your back, right? Okay. So you would feel some discomfort potentially in your hip and then the low back, right? But again, I don't think that's the case for you, right? Same thing on this side. Again, you would feel something going down the leg, a numbness, a tingling, maybe even some sort of pain. And you again feel it hip, low back potentially, right? Again, nothing. And then we would do both legs just to see if there is an association with that as well, right? And again, no pain. The next orthopedic test we like to do is what's called Kemp's, and it's just giving yourself a big hug, and we rotating the body. Now, most people are gonna have tightness in general because we don't do enough rotation and lateral flexion, right? Stretching. But besides that, there's still a potential for there to be pain when it comes to rotating because of the fact of the way the discs are set up and the way that the vertebrae are set up. When you do a rotation or a lateral flexion movement, that pinches the disc. And if it's pinching the disc and you do have a bulge or herniation, it normally pinches up against the nerves that are running down in your back. So if I turn you a certain way, there's a potential for me to affect that disc, which then will affect the nerve, which then shoots down the discomfort down into the leg, right? And so although you were a little tight turning, there was still no reproduction of that pain, right?
No pain.
So now what I'm doing is I'm saying, good. That tells me that you don't potentially have any disc bulge or herniation, right? That makes me feel a little bit more relieved. That makes me tell you that you should have or be a little bit more relieved, because that's a major problem, right? Something that can be fixed, but for the most part, it's a major problem. So then what I would then transition to is, okay, well, let's say the glutes. What's going on with the glutes? So I would have you go down prone or face down. And when you go down prone, my first thing is we want to look at leg length. The reason why we want to look at leg length because it helps us determine the way your hips are, right? Okay, unless someone had a structural issue where they were born, or congenital issue where they were born with actual one leg longer than the other, normally if you have one leg longer than the other, it means that you have an imbalance off in your pelvic and hip area, okay? And so you actually do. So your right is a little bit longer, and even if I come up, it's still a little bit longer on there as well too, right? So what that tells me is that your hips are off, and that could be through a bunch of things. It could be from sitting down for a while. It could be from if you, for example, you know, if you're a righty or so forth, if you just predominantly put your right leg up more when you're in the house, or when you're doing any physical activity, if you notice that you go a little harder with your workout with your right side more than your left, things like that can affect that, right? So then I will bring it all the way up, and then I'll start at your SI joints, okay? And I'm feeling where your SI joints are. And again, you can tell that one is higher than the other. And that just means that the hips, when they're supposed to be level, they should look like this. What'll happen is they can rotate or go anterior, posterior, right? And it just feels a little off. Okay. So if I turn my hip like this, right? My leg appears to be shorter on this side just because of me torsioning, or the torsion of my hips going this way. When really all I did was push this side forward and push this side back. Yeah. That's really all it is that's going on the inside. So it's just a matter of relaxing the certain muscles that need to be relaxed in order to get it back into play.
Gotcha.
Okay.
Okay.
And so then I would just check the spine, and that's just going to be a part of it, because once the hips are messed up, it's one long spine. So if you mess up one part, most likely there's other areas that are affected, right?
Gotcha.
And then you can see that there's a couple areas in the low back that are a little restricted. It's not restricted a lot. It's actually not that bad, surprisingly. But then from there, I would say, okay, well, you definitely do have a little bit of restriction. But again, I don't think that would be your issue. And your SI joints being off, again, that's an issue, but it's not your major problem. Because again, we're trying to reproduce the pain that ran down into the leg. Yeah. So then the next part is, as I would tell you, all right, these are not affecting that, right? So glutes, 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 glutes. Boom. So what do the glutes do? They help with what? Extension. Extension. So now what I'll do is I'll go ahead and say, well, let's lift your right leg up first. Straight leg as much as you can. Now, you don't notice this, but you guys will see that his leg can only go up so high, right? That's as far as it's gonna get, and he's actually trying his hardest because I can see the glute firing. Now, go ahead and bring it down. And then the next thing is I would tell him to lift his left leg up as high as he can go. Now you can see he definitely has strong legs anyway, and strong hamstrings here. But for the most part, you can actually see his left leg go up just a tad bit higher than the right leg. And that just shows you how off one side is than the other. So then that tells me now there must be an issue within the glute that's causing that problem. Now, one thing that you will learn to do, and you playing sports, I was hoping they would have told you this before, but there's a firing pattern that it is when you sit, stand, walk, run, doing everything like that. And the way it should work is that your glutes should fire before your hamstrings, should fire before your low back. So if you notice, if I were to put 3 fingers, one finger here, one finger here, and one finger here, if he moves his leg, if I ask him to move his leg, the first muscle that literally activates first is his butt, is his glutes. The hamstrings then will kick in after that, and then you will feel the low back start to move and start to help out. The problem is when you have these glute issues, the glutes are no longer going first. Either the hamstring or the low back are attempting to help out. Yeah. And that's not how it should be, and it's putting too much stress on these areas, and so the glute starts getting aggravated. So the one that's deepest in there is the piriformis. The piriformis is the one that's closest to the sciatic nerve, which is why you may feel as if that sciatic pain is going down, or
Going
it's
down
similar
into
to it, because the piriformis is the one that's closest to the sciatic nerve. And if that one's irritable or irritated, it starts to inflame, it starts to become spasmic, and it pushes up against that nerve.
Okay.
So now if you've been sitting for so long, right, that now muscle pushes up against that nerve, becomes aggravated, and then it starts feeling or reproducing as if it's like a sciatic nerve.
Gotcha. Okay. All right, so after all those squats and deadlifts I realized that my glutes, well, my right glute in particular, don't fire as much. So what's the next step in helping me improve that?
Okay, so normally what I would then do is I would explain to the patient like how I did there, you know, what's going on and what needs to happen in order to improve that, right? And so what the misconception is that chiropractors don't do physical therapy, and we want to adjust everybody, right? And that's not the case. I'm not trying to adjust you every day you come in. It's always going to be about what your body is telling me. So I'm basing it off of what your body is telling me, right? And so right now you definitely do need adjustment, because it's telling me, hey, my hips are off. I'm a little torqued a little bit. Not too significant, not too bad, but just something that can be tweaked a little bit, right? But your glutes though, that's different. So your glutes are not firing like it should. So what that tells me is that yes, those squats and deadlifts are good. They're great for you. But what we forget is that little bit of stretching before and after, right? And then the type of stretches you do. Most of the time, most people don't know how to stretch their glutes. Most of the time, they're just doing leg stretches, which is good for not making sure your hamstrings and quads and everything else are bad. But your glutes also have 4 muscles there. So you need to also stretch those. So what I would then do is basically demonstrate and show you certain exercises that you not only going to do here in office, but then you would try to start incorporating into your daily, you know, routine to start decreasing the discomfort, right? Because it's not all about just coming into the office and getting treated. It's also about going home and getting, you know, as much relief from all the pain as possible. And so we don't want you coming here for the rest of your life, right? Yes, I'm a doctor. Yes, I want to, you know, maintain my office. But at the same time, if you're coming here for the rest of your life, that means that I haven't done my job. And so the key to keep you from having or being in so much discomfort is to show you and educate you on everything that you can do and shouldn't maybe do outside of here, so that you can get better and then not have to have so many episodes of coming in saying, hey doc, I'm still in discomfort, still in pain. Yeah.
All right, perfect. Well, let's see what we can do to improve this.
So that would be how to start off and kind of get those muscle firing. And then what we would do is we would transition into the table work. So these are the more static stretches.
Yeah.
Okay. So this is where you go ahead and you're gonna lie face up or supine. All right. And so now we will go into normally. I would do the stretches, or I would have my staff, they would come in and do the stretches with you. And so we would go ahead and do your basic ones, right? So your hamstrings, right? We would get into there. We would see here that one, you are a little tight, okay? You're not as flexible as I thought you probably would be. But again, we would try to get to about as taut as you can get, so it's about as stiff as you can get, and kind of hold it there. And I like to do it for about 20-second holds, 2 times per leg, okay? Bring the leg right over the top, and you will pull over, right? And this is something you can do at home easily by just grabbing your hand and pulling down. And what that does is it gets the IT band. The IT band attaches at the hip, comes all the way down to the knee. And when that's tight, it keeps all the adductors and abductors, mainly the abductors, basically tight inside there, and they can't really move like how they want to move, right? Which also those affect because those attach those muscles per se attach at the hip and at the pelvis and so forth. Okay. Then I also like to do a leg pullover. Okay. Again, this kind of helps with a little bit of the glute as well as a little bit of the IT band. And again, you are a little tight, not as bad here, but definitely still a little tight here as well. And then the last one would be the most important for your condition, okay? So with you having what's called a Piriformis Syndrome, right? Is that we want to do a Piriformis Stretch. So here's the glute stretch that I was stating in the earlier part of the video where most people don't know, right? And so I'm gonna show you 3 different ways so that depending on your body type and those who are watching's body type, they can do it in a different way, and the way that they can transition or advance if they've, if that become too easy for them.
Okay.
So the initial one is you're gonna bring the knees up, and what you do, you will fold the leg here, just as if you were sitting in a seat, right? And you were trying to bring your foot up there and you were trying to look important, right? So then you bring your hand and you would push down. So you push down this area. Now you tell me, you should feel that in your glute. You don't feel it as much. Why? Because for you, you're a little bit more flexible than the normal person, right? So the normal person, this right here, you would feel it directly into the glute, because when you're this tight, most of the patients who can't get there, or people who can't get their leg up, they end up being like this when they're sitting down. And that's because of how tight their hips and glutes are. But yours is a little bit better than that, so that's why this is too simple for you. So for you, I would then suggest to go to the next step, right? So the next step is then bringing your hand through and then you pulling back. Now, you tell me again, do you feel the glute now with this?
I feel it, but it just feels like tightness.
Okay. Again, you probably still a little bit better than the average. Again, this is different, right? The only one that I don't like about this though is because you end up using more of your arms and it stresses that out while pulling, right? But again, for the people who can do this one already, right? This will be the transition phase for them to go to that from that, right? Because then you get a little bit more depth into that stretch. So the next one would then be for you to stand up. Now I would if I could, but today I wore the wrong pants for this, all right? The leg needs to come up, and I guess I'll try anyway, just to, all right, so the leg will come up. Yeah, look at that, I could. Now if it rips, you paying for it. No, all right, so we'll come over like that, and that's where you want to stretch, and you'll get real depth into the stretch that way, and you'll feel it the most when you do that. And you see already how bad it is. And you want to bring this leg back just a little bit. Just a little bit. I'm not taller than you, no. And this table's pretty tall too. Now the only bad part is, right, that we still need your arms there and hands there.
You got a rope?
No rope. You used to tackle people for a living, so.
Yoga 101, baby.
So this shows right here, and this demonstrates how tight your glutes are and how messed up they are, right? So yeah, they may be strong, which is good. So that means lifting wise, you have no trouble. But your mobility is restricted. Gotcha. And so we don't want to strengthen bad movement, right? And that's what you've done so far. You've been strengthening bad movement. So in order to fix this, you need to start stretching here and getting a little bit, you need to start stretching that out, and that'll stretch out the glute, and then you'll start noticing that once you stretch it out, then you start strengthening back on top of that, you will have both, the combination of both working in a concert that will be best for you and conducive for you, so that you don't have any problems later on.
Absolutely. All right. Okay, Doc, so with these adjustments, you see it all the time when you hear it, the cracking noise. I mean, I know for most, that freaks me out. You see somebody, they crack a neck, or you see it on YouTube, they have their neck and they're cracking it or snapping it. What is that? What does that sound? What does that do to people? Can you explain that for me?
Yes. So for one, let's get away from cracking, because when you say cracking, right, that kind of makes every person or patient, individual, whatever, it makes them think that you're like breaking a bone or whatever, right? But that's not the case. So what happens is you have a restriction within your movement. That restriction comes from your actual spine. So you have these vertebrae that's going down from your neck all the way down to your butt, right? And within that, there's a disc space right in between it. There's like a little cushion in between each vertebrae, which is that bone. Now, when you have a restriction, the bone either turns left, either turns right, either goes forward, either goes backwards, or laterally flexes each way, either way, right? And when it does that, that puts pressure onto the disc. And those discs are filled with water, nutrients, and so forth, right? So like a water balloon, if I pinch this side of the water balloon, right, all the water comes to this side of the water balloon. And there's now like hardly any space on this side. And that's what happens to your disc, is there's no space on that side for there to be water, nutrients, and so forth to give that disc height that you need for improved or better movement. Okay. So then by not having the water and nutrients on that side, you end up gaining gases, right? All this gas starts coming into that area. So now when I go into do an adjustment, whether it be your back, neck, knee, wherever, right? What ends up happening is I rotate that area. So if it's the vertebrae is rotated to the left, then I'm rotating it back right. What I've now done is released that gas that was in that area that was being now trapped because it was being compressed due to the restriction. I've now released it. So that's the cracking sound you hear. It's not the actual bone or anything like that. Okay. It's just that that disc now is releasing that gas so that the water and nutrients can go into that area, and you no longer have, that sound of that movement. That's why it pops like that, and it's good to go. And I will say, for those who are out there, stop adjusting yourselves. We call it self-adjusting. It's okay in a sense of getting a little bit of relief, but the problem is that if I affect one area on the spine, there's multiple areas that are affected. You can't just affect one area and that be it. You end up affecting the above and a little bit below. So when you self-adjust yourself, you end up only getting some area, and then there's gonna be areas still left. So that's why you notice if you get, if you crack your own neck per se, right? You crack your own neck, later on throughout that day, you end up having to need to do it again. And that's because you didn't get all the levels that needed to crack. So that's why going to a chiropractor, you can get the adjustment and we can find the specific area. So we're a little bit more about specificity, and we can actually get in there and adjust the area that needs it, so that now, once you get done, you can go through the rest of the day, the next day, maybe even the day after that, and not have any discomfort or pain and so forth or restriction.
Okay, so of course we see my excellent stretching, my excellent mobility. I think we could all agree. So now, if we're going to the adjustment, I'm still a little nervous about it. So, what's our next move? What's our next step?
All right, so the next step would be retesting, right? So now that we've done some stretches, okay, what should have happened is there should be a little bit more mobility. There should be a little bit more relaxation within the muscles, so that it makes it easy for me. What people don't realize is that, and it's been a little outdated, okay, where chiropractors in the past used to put you into a position for an adjustment and they would thrust, right? And that thrust sometimes, depending on who it is, can come very strong, very passive. And there's so much in between, right? So for me, what I like to do is, by doing all of the activity first, it makes it so that by the time you get to me, it should be easy peasy. Okay? And the reason why is because the body naturally wants to fix itself. It naturally wants to straighten out, right? But it only wants to straighten out if it's giving the proper tools to do it. So what I would then do is have you lay face down. And again, we're rechecking, right? So just from a little bit of stretches, you can see now, I don't know if you want to come close in, but you can actually see that the feet are actually getting closer and closer to being the same length in comparison to first. And then we will bring them up to check. And again, they're now at least a little closer, which at the beginning, this leg here was a little longer, but now they're about the same, okay? So then I would then come up, again, checking the SI joint, see if we kind of relax some of the muscles there with the hips. And it's still a little off here, at least on the left-hand side, right? Actually, no, I'm sorry, on the right-hand side. And yeah, definitely on the right-hand side. And so with that being said, we're definitely gonna end up needing adjustment, especially low back here. And then I'll check to see if there's any little extra, because if it's down here in the hip, there's going to always be a little bit above that's going to be affected, and there is. It's a little bit of lateral flexion on that side. And then glute wise, again, we'll check same thing, leg lift. So lift this leg up, definitely gets a little higher than what it was before. Same thing on this side, definitely higher, okay? So you can see this one got a lot higher, but we still gonna have this little issue up here. So then what I would have you do is lay on your left hand side. And by this, we'll have you tuck here. Gonna have you pull arm here. And you would just relax in that form. And the whole key is to relax your top half as much as possible. And what should happen is, by me just torsioning your body just a little bit, right? It should already do its job with the thrust, right? And that's how it would feel, right, with an adjustment. And that's where you could potentially hear that cracking sound when doing it. Now, I will say while you're here, for those at home, I would say always trying to hear for a cracking sound is bad, because it's not about that. It's about the mobility or joint mobilization, right? So the key is to try to get you moving better before leaving this office, right? Absolutely. If you don't hear a crack sound, because it's always not loud cracks, so even when you try to crack yourself, right, you end up, sometimes one crack is louder than the other. Other times it's barely any crack or anything like that. That's what you shouldn't look for. You should just feel, how do I feel when I leave, exactly, right? Then I would then turn over to the opposite side. And then same thing, but this time I would be feeling, because that one was more for the hip there, right? This one would be more for low back. So I would feel further up here to get that adjustment, and then the same thing, I'm looking to thrust there, right? And so that would make you feel better, at least for the low back. So now I've hit two spots for potential, or where the potential discomfort was. Yeah. And then last but not least, I like to do one that helps out, I think, most people. So I have you laying face up. And this one is kind of like an all-in-one, okay, right? So we've already said that you had a little bit of hip issue, a little bit of glute issue, a little bit of low back issue, right? So then what I would do is affect the hip right now. So your femur head is what attaches into the hip, okay? And attaches is what's called acetabulum, right? When you attach right into that area, what needs to happen is that space needs to be enough so that it gives you mobility and more movement and so forth. But when it's jammed in, you start to feel like you can't lift as high, whether it be forward, backward, side, and so forth. So what I would do is bring out the leg, ask you to relax as much as possible, feel where that hip head is and see how that movement is, right? And I can feel it's a little off. So then I would come around, I would have you grab or hold on to the sides, have you relax the leg, and then what I would do is I would thrust back. By thrusting back, like I said, it gaps the area from where the femur head hits that acetabulum, right? And it makes it so that now you feel a little taller, you feel like you have a little bit more movement and so forth. Don't be alarmed if you feel a little bit in the knee that gaps and a little bit in the ankle that gaps. Why? This is a long lever adjustment, like we like to call, right? And so by doing that, you end up getting some residual more cracks. You get like a little bit of area in your knee, a little bit in your ankle, and it feels really good, because now when you stand up, you're like, wow, you know, I feel my whole hip move, I feel my ankle move, I feel everything move. So you get a little bit of everything.
All right, we're all finished here. Great experience, feeling great, improving much better. My stretching has gotten, you know, I would say it got much better, right?
Okay.
So let's see. But Doc, what is a way that we can reach out for you? If anybody's looking to schedule anything for you, you know, how can they reach you?
All right, well, Action Physical has multiple locations, literally from Port St. Lucie all the way down to Miami. So I don't literally work all of those, right? I work the West Palm Beach location. So what you can do is you can just go on to online on Google, type in actionphysical.com, and just look up the West Palm Beach location, type in, you know, the number or look up the number or so forth, and even the email, and email me and whatever, I'll answer it. I'll eventually get to it. But for the most part though, that's the main way you can do it. You can even look us up, I think, on Instagram as well as Facebook. We have pages, just look up actionphysical.com. And yeah, I mean, that's the best way to get to us. And we literally take all appointments. Literally, we don't have any real set times. We prefer you to come in at a time, but you know, we're open to anything. If you say you know, whenever your walk-ins, if you can come in, as long as we're not too busy, we'll accept you.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
All right, people, come get fixed.